Welcome back, everybody, to the Little Less Fear podcast. I'd like to introduce Dr. Lawrence D. Mass. He's the co-founder of the Gay Men's Health Crisis in New York City, author of We Must Love One Another or Die. I love that, by the way. The Life and Legacies of Larry Kramer, a 2-volume collection, Dialogues of the Sexual Revolution, and a memoir, Confessions of a Jewish Wagnerite, Being Gay and Jewish in America. Welcome to a Little Less Fear podcast, Dr. Mass. I am 3% Jewish, not that much, but when I grow a long beard, a lot of people think I'm just full-on Jewish. Welcome to my show.
Thank you. Thank you. I know when I visited Spain, I would talk to people about, the history of Jews in Spain before the expulsion and, the period of America and the Inquisition and all of that. And the little secret that they said that the Spanish people have is that everybody has all Spanish people have a little Jewish blood in them.
I was just going to ask you when you said that, because I did ancestry.com and it turns out I'm 22% Spanish from Spain. And then underneath that, I saw Jewish and Scandinavian and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, whoa, well, how did Jewish get in there? And now that makes sense. I didn't know that little piece.
Yes, well, the Jews and the Moors, the Muslims from North Africa, were big populations in Spain, and it was all very integrated. And then during the period of Columbus, Queen Isabella, and Ferdinand, there was this big crackdown on the minorities, which is sort of the history that we all deal with, these crackdowns on.
Right, still dealing with it, yeah.
Anything perceived as different. And but there's a big history there of Jews in Spain. Yes, you've heard of.
That makes sense now.
Well, have you heard of the Sephardic people?
No.
Sephardic people are Jewish people in the sort of Mediterranean area of Europe. A lot of them originally, are primarily from Spain, who, during various periods of expulsion, they were dispersed and, throughout Europe. And there's the Eastern European Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews, and the Sephardic Jews, two sort of big categories of Jewish people. So
that's really incredible. It's no wonder my Jewish friends love the Latin culture, and I had no clue. And actually, you know what? My cousin, she's a mariachi singer, and she married a Jewish man, and he's also in the mariachi group. And it always made me like, wait a minute, a Jewish man playing the violin in the mariachi group? Now I understand.
Oh yes, their Jews definitely migrated to Mexico. Actually, the Inquisition followed Jews and to Mexico, as I understand it. But the Inquisition had all these extreme laws, and of course we know about the Inquisition, and Jews were forced to convert, and they became known in Spain, most notably, and they became known as conversos. And to this day, they find, well, that conversos were Jews who officially converted to Catholicism, but who still practiced their religion in secret. So to this day, they find these little basements and alcoves and things that were hidden in these homes where people secretly practiced their religion during the periods of oppression. So interesting stuff. Yeah, if you're not in the majority, or you're not part of the dominant and dominating group, when the going gets tough, things get tough.
That's true. That's for sure. Well, thanks so much for that history. I really appreciate it. I love that. So tell us about your books. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about your history. I feel like you definitely are seasoned and have a lot of good information coming up.
Well, I was drawn to you and your experience because I think that trans people have this experience of being different, and there with lots of different kinds of pressure to conform to one category or another. And even the ones that are liberal and sympathetic, they want you to be one thing. Or so if you're gay, okay. If you want to be, dress cross-dress, that's okay. But they want you to fit into categories that are understood and designated and known. And when you don't do that, when you register the levels of discomfort that you have, people get flummoxed, they get stymied, like, well, wouldn't it be easier for everybody for you to just, conform to one of these categories and not keep, having, almost courting all these difficulties. And to me, your voice is loud and clear that you are in a long-term process of wending your way and finding your way along a trajectory that has never been clear and still isn't completely clear. I mean, even if you're trans, once you've transitioned, then they still want you to be in one category, And so if you're bisexual or any, or you're sexually fluid, that sort of throws the whole thing off again. And people,
Right.
People don't want to do the work of accepting difference. I think
Yes.
a good example of that is this whole period we're in of using pronouns, and to me, it's clear that, people just want to have themselves better understood and represented. It's not necessarily easy for everybody to fully adapt to that, and so there has to be some give and take on both sides. But a lot of people just react with, oh, come on, there's, just why can't you just be normal and real, and make it easy for everybody. I mean, just, So, well, I have lots of different. I don't have anything as intense exactly or fully equivalent. Excuse me, of a trans experience, but the thing that I've written about is a kind of keystone of my memoir. This is an older copy. This is the original copy of my book.
Wow, that's an incredible cover. I love that.
Confessions of a Jewish Wagnerite. And this is the cover of the sequel to that book, my new book. Can you see this?
Wow, yeah, that looks amazing.
Okay, so basically, if you're not an opera person, you're not a music person, it's a little bit, I don't want to sort of overload a lot of information but so lots of people have prejudices, and lots of artists and writers and composers have been anti-Semitic, intolerant, hate, have had various levels of hatred for Jews and other minorities and gays, and so those things are pretty common historically. And so I mean, you can discover that Beethoven was anti-Semitic, and Tchaikovsky was anti-Semitic, and Mussorgsky was anti-Semitic, and so these things are not uncommon. And Wagner, Richard Wagner, possibly, I think by many estimates, the greatest opera composer who ever lived, or one of the very greatest. He would be on any list of the top two. He was anti-Semitic, but the level of his anti-Semitism was in a whole different realm. It was really deep and serious, and he expressed it in tracts and treatises and letters. And in fact, he was a major singular inspiration for Hitler and what became Nazism. Wow. So it's very bad. But again, he was a very great composer, and it's the whole business of the anti-Semitism and Jew hatred and all that is not so explicit in the works, which are kind of great sprawling artworks. So there are a lot of Jews in music and opera, and they are very, they've done the sort of work of, bad man, great art. So they still enjoy the art, appreciate the art of it. So I'm one of these people, I feel almost like a trans person and being like a spoiler. I've not been comfortable accepting status quo. I, like so many other music and opera people, I fell in love with Wagner. I was very, but I discovered that there were these whole levels of obfuscation and deception and troubledness that I didn't want to just do the standard thing of just deal with it. I'm sure you have many, many times been confronted with situations where people are saying, just deal with it. I mean, this may not be perfect fit for you. You may not, but just deal with society's prejudice, society's impatience, and so I actually, I sort of had a major insights about this, and that were facilitated, but I fell in love. I fell in love with a leading gay activist who happened to be Jewish, and that sort of opened up this whole world of insights and perceptions about anti-Semitism and being Jewish that I had never really experienced before. I had a lot of self-hatred. I think when you're a member of a minority, if you're, like your experience talking about trans, or if you are gay, or if you are Jewish, or if you are Black, or even if you're a woman, you internalize a lot of society's negative attitudes, you feel you have internalized prejudice. And I had a lot of that. And once I started to, via my love affair, my 40-year relationship with Arnie.
Wow, it's a long time.
Yes, he was he was a legendary gay activist who died earlier this year in January.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
He was 81, and but over time, I began to because I had my sensitivities via my love for him, my awareness of Jews and Jewish culture and Jewish history and anti-Semitism was considerably heightened, and I found myself no longer in a place of comfort with the status quo that goes on in the worlds of music and opera. I'm not looking to censor anybody. I'm not looking to, but it was not, I couldn't go along with the standard thing of, okay, he was a bad man. He was a terrible anti-Semite. There's all this bad stuff with Hitler and Nazism, but he was a great composer. Deal with it, live with it. Let's all get on. That's kind of the standard, that's where most people are at. And there's a lot of impatience in the worlds of music and culture with anything like me that wants to sort of rock this boat. If any, I mean, there's been a lot of acknowledgement of how bad the whole Hitler and Nazism thing was, but the mainstream world of music and opera and Bach, they are ready to move on. They're tired of all this stuff, like the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. They want to get past this. Okay, Wagner was bad. This was terrible. Hitler, all this stuff like that. Now that we've admitted it, now can we move on? That's the attitude.
So then how do you, now that people have admitted it and now that people are asking to move on, how do you want to rock the boat?
Well, I mean, my books are, have a lot of exploration and discussion of how these issues play out and how they're ignored, and, the impact that they have. There's quite a bit of stuff there. In the first book, there's a foreword by the composer's great grandson, who became my friend and colleague, Gottfried Wagner. And there is, he also is the second book, the sequel, on the future of Wagnerism, is dedicated to him. And the first book, The Confessions of Jewish Wagnerite, is dedicated to Arnie. So it's really, it's an experience that really hasn't been acknowledged. If you take me out of it, if you look back at the world's this whole business of Wagner and Jews, you'll only find all these examples of people who just made the accommodation that I described. You know, bad man, great art. The Jews do not necessarily, they're not happy that there was all this anti-Semitism and all that, but they make that accommodation. They still love Wagner. They don't, you know, rattle the cage and rock the boat the way I sort of seem to be doing.
Dr. Mass, sorry to interrupt. For those tuning in for the first time and those that are not quite knowledgeable with the word Semitism, do you mind giving us just a little definition on that?
Well, anti-Semitism is basically another term for Jew hatred.
Okay.
And, you know, just like I think a lot of your people who might follow you are very aware of anti-gay. Yes. Well, there's anti-Semitism is still very alive and well. I mean, it's, you know, there's been a great upsurge in anti-Semitic incidents. You know, there was that, you know, there have been bombings and shootings and you know, attacks, and so all the minorities in the current period with the rise of these autocrats and these autocracies, all of the minorities are experiencing a great deal of you know, they're all experiencing increases in, you know, in crime against them, in hostility and crime. It's all over the place. So, like, if somebody were to ask you to talk about, you know, anti-trans stuff that's going on, there's tons of it, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. All these bills and everything, they want to take away your medical care and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's that kind of thing that's happening across the board. It's happening to women. You see what's happening with abortion. It's happening to Jews. There's a lot of anti-Semitic stuff going on. It's happening to gays generally. They have all these bills to, you know, a lot of really serious, so anti-gay stuff. So basically that is kind of what happens when you have these, when fascism starts to march forward.
So true.
And fascism is galloping ahead now on a global scale. And, you know, it's really frightening. I mean, you have Putin in Russia, you have Trump here, you have Orban in Hungary, you have the guy in Brazil, Bolsonaro. Yet there are so many. It seems Xi in China, the Maduro in Venezuela. It's almost as if the predominant mode, certainly the predominant trend, is towards fascism. And in fascists always operate by blaming and scapegoating. They all do the same thing. It's almost like a cookbook, autocracy, or a simple playbook, autocracy 101. You have a lot of propaganda, a lot of malicious disinformation. You spread a lot of lies. You know, you incite, you foment violence and hatred, and you know, so any one of these people I mentioned, they've all become masters at it, and they've all excelled. And at the same time, they are, you know, aggressively moving to augment their own power. Yeah. You know, which is ideally they'll in each of those cases, they're all virtually, you know, they're all autocrats, and they're all virtually dictators, very, very close to, and their countries have become police state dictatorships, or are rapidly becoming so.
Oh yeah. Why do you think it's ever so prevalent now than it was, let's say, 20 years ago?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, now, Arnie, I was telling you about my partner who died. He was he was very clear-eyed, and he was, but he was, and he was very sort of loving and affirming. He would not dwell in places of depression or pessimism. Anyway, he said to me, quite frankly, at one point, a couple of months before he died, when I was once again becoming extremely upset about fascist trends that we're dealing with, he said, you're a pessimist. So this is the answer to your question. Unfortunately, these movements and these trends are trans-historical and global. They've always been there. It's almost as if they are fundamental to human nature.
Oh, geez.
I hate to say that. That sort of makes me almost like some kind of sociobiologist or something. But the history of domination and war and empires and conquests and all this stuff, this is a predominant mode of human history. So I don't, when you say it was less 20 years ago, we've been in in an incredibly comparatively comfortable, quiet period of history. We had two gigantic world wars, absolutely monumental, terrifying things on a scale that nobody could have imagined. So we've been in an interim period. Me, Larry Mass, the pessimist, sort of assumes that something on that scale will happen again, most likely, and maybe even soon. It may already have started. So I think we do have to try to do everything we can to be in a better place, to be human, to be humane, to be, to do the best we can despite the odds and despite, these formidable traits of human nature that keep manifesting themselves. So I'm committed to doing that. It's just that I'm not too optimistic at this particular juncture.
So you think that even 20 years from now, things will remain the same in just a different way?
I think 20 years from now, I'll be happy if we're all here. I mean, we haven't been wiped out by some nuclear catastrophe. Look, for me, there's one possible optimistic scenario. I think, my sense is that we're headed to some version of a civil war, of a repeat of the civil war that we had in this country. That was a really horrendous, horrible, bloody thing.
Yeah.
But, I think that positive values and concerns and people prevailed, so that it was a kind of a victory for mankind that happened. But it wasn't a simple or easy or enduring victory. And it always seemed to me, I was born and raised in the South, in the deep South, and I was always aware of all this history. I don't know that it always seemed to me that there was a real possibility, if not a probability, of some level of repeating this history. Wouldn't be exactly the same, like the North, the South, and we're in a more modern era, and I don't know how it would play out, but I think the divisions are once again quite deep, and they're being stoked by these, like the Trumpers and these are right. So it's pretty scary. I really do hope I'm wrong. I certainly could be wrong, because I think that so the positive scenario that even I can have is that with this precedent of the Civil War in
Precedent.
America and how it played out, that if something that terrible or along those lines happens again, perhaps we will prevail once again in a comparable way, so that, human values and equality and regard for life and regard for human rights and minority rights and, equality, and these things will once again be ascendant. So that's where my optimism is, but it involves the likelihood that we're going to have some level of a civil war. I hope that's wrong. It might well be wrong. I think we're on a precipice right now.
Mhm.
Let's just hope that somehow, things move in the right direction. Not,
I hope
not
so too.
right, quote unquote. I mean, a good direction.
I definitely hope so too. Absolutely. What is something you want the world to know?
Oh boy, it's a challenging question. I think the main thing that we as LGBTQ plus people have learned, and other minority people, in my case, Jewish, the main thing that life has taught us by our own experience is that we're different, but we're the same. And
Absolutely.
the main lesson is that difference does not mean, inimical or hostile or dangerous.
Right.
The thing to do is to look for the similarities. In what way are we similar? We're all human beings. We all share common desires and beliefs and traits. I mean, some of the specifics of those desires and beliefs and traits may vary, but they have a great deal of fundamental common ground. I mean, the religions, the major religions, they get distorted by extremism, but they all have basic precepts of, caring and, you know, uh, you know, love thy neighbor as thyself,
Yeah, good morals, good virtue. Yeah.
charity, you know, s- uh, 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 you know, um, you know, good values that all people can embrace. So I think that is, it's challenging. I think when any sort of group that is basically, I don't want to use the word entrenched yet, a group that is kind of situated with expectations of how things should be and traditions and all that. When something comes along that seems to threaten that, there's a great deal of resistance and fear.
Mhm.
There's a lot of fear is the basis of so much,
Oh yeah.
anger and negative reaction and defensiveness. And, so if people, especially, if the religious extremists were just a little bit more in touch with the basic principles of their own actual religions,
Oh yeah, right. Uh-huh.
yeah, affirming and believing of, um, religious principles and values, I think we'd all be in a better place. But unfortunately, it doesn't always play out like that. So
It doesn't, and we could just definitely just as much as possible we can march to the beat of our own drum or march to the beat of others' drums. But just as long as we can keep a good positive connection, I think that's really the best thing we could do.
yes, yes, I
Dr.
think.
Lawrence D. Mass, everybody on our Little Less Fear podcast. Tell us more how we can find your books, where we can find your books, and how we can find you if anybody needs to get a hold of you.
Okay, well, the best thing to do, I do have a website, and
Okay.
there's lots of stuff on the website. There are references to all my books.
Okay.
There's some interview material. There are links to interviews that have appeared on YouTube and NPR. And, you know, I wrote columns on Huffington Post and on medium.com. I still have a column there. And so that website is lawrencedmass.com.
Okay,
So
excellent.
that's LAWRENCEDMASS.com. No
.com.
periods or spaces.
Got it.
Mhm.
And where can we find your book? On your website as well?
Well, my books are all available on Amazon.
Okay, great.
So, and they're on the website, and there's descriptions of them and some
Excellent.
discussion and pictures, and, you know, so, yes.
Great.
So
Well, thanks so much. Yeah.
oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. I really appreciate you giving us a history and all of your information and all of your knowledge that you've shared. Really appreciative for this. And I'm definitely going to be looking on your website. Thanks so much for being a part of this journey. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. I sure appreciate being on here, and I appreciate your good work and example. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll keep in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.